Hello and welcome to part 3 of the Necron Smash Lord. I am really excited to paint some of this today. So we're going to work on some of the OSL on the hammer. But first, as we mentioned at the end of last video, we're going to just glaze some of this side of the model back a little bit. So we're going to speed this up as well for you. But this is just Abaddon Black. It's about a 5-to-1 glaze mix, something like that, five parts water to 1 part paint. And we'll just kind of speed through this. But we are applying this glaze to pretty much everywhere that the glow is going to be hitting. So everywhere on this side of the the body and the arms and everything, because we want the glow to be a little bit more obvious. So if this was too bright a blue, then the glow wouldn't really show up on this very much. So we just glaze this back a tiny bit to give the glow somewhere to actually work on the model. So once we've got this done, we're going to start sketching out exactly where we want the highlights to be from the light source. The hammer is going to be the light source, and we need to get the idea of where that light is going to land on the model. So a lot of this position here, where I'm holding the model now, is going to be a lot of where I'm going to be looking down the angle of the hammer to see what I can see on the model. Because the light cast from the hammer isn't going to be bending round corners or anything. So, for instance, that cloak is going to be creating a shadow. So we're going to have some blue in the recesses in there, and then some green on the tops of the ribs and things. So it's going to be quite a slow video after this speed up has finished. And we're just kind of flying through this at 300%. I'm just showing you where all the glazes have gone, just to calm all that down. I hope you're all having a good time in isolation and coping okay. So this is the first coat. So this is olive green, and actually I used the wrong brush. This is the brush I was using for glazing, and as you can see, the bristles are absolutely screwed on that one. So I'll swap it over. So this is olive green from Model Colour, and we start, and we're going to try and get quite a bit of texture on this. So this is watered down, about 2 parts water to 1 part paint. It is a very translucent paint anyway, but what we're going to do is we're going to kind of scribble it on. We're going to scrub it on like this to create some texture as we go, and you can kind of load up the brush a little bit and then manipulate it, because it's so wet. The paint is so watered down. You can kind of drop it on the model and then manipulate it around a little bit, and really get it working. So this is the base texture that we're going to carry on working on, and this kind of scribble is what we're going to be using for a lot of the video to build on that texture. And as we get further and further in, you'll see the texture kind of building up in layers across it. Same thing here. Look, so we're just kind of building these layers up. One of the things we've got to pay attention to are the shapes of the hammer. And there's little recesses here and there which we want to try and accentuate a little bit by having them a tiny bit darker. This is the darkest of the greens that we're going to be using anyway. So that recess just there that you can see, I've just left a little bit of black in there. We're going to leave that to add a bit of shape to that side of the hammer. The orb that we're just kind of painting around there, that's going to be bright green as well, so that's going to be a bit more of a light source as well. And then the head of the hammer is going to be quite good, because if we can get a little bit of light direction on there as well. So that line that I've just painted on there, that's going to be a little bit of a brighter highlight. And sketching these, it's the sketching style is once we've got all the layers on there, it'll start looking a little bit more like lightning, like energy coursing through the surface of the hammer, and then we can add little lightning strikes onto it as well towards the end of the paint job. So we've got all these edges, trying to, and when I'm highlighting these edges, I'm trying to keep them quite light. I'm not doing a hard highlight edge all the way around. They're trying to kind of keep them broken a little bit, and exactly the same with all of these parts here, trying to keep the highlights a little bit broken. And just those little breaks in the highlight will start showing a bit more texture as well. You don't need a nice sharp edge highlight across the whole model, or at least parts of it to show that the texture is coming through. So this is where we're going to start sketching out exactly where we want the highlights to be hitting. So obviously the hammer as a light source is going to be catching the top of this arm all the way around this arm here, and then onto the rib cage. And as I turn the model a little bit further so that the hammer is towards you, you'll be able to kind of gauge what you can see and what's going to get hit. So here you can kind of get there we go. So you can kind of get the idea of here of what parts of the body are going to get hit. The rib cage there, and just around the back of the chest. There's going to be a line that's created, a shadow line that's created from the cloak, that's what we're just kind of sketching in there now. And then the same on the thigh. The thigh is going to be because that's curved away from the hammer. That's going to be fading out a little bit, so we're just kind of sketching that base highlight in there. We're going to be glazing over these as well to add a little bit of the blue base tone back in, and also to soften some of the brush marks. And the glazing, you can do as much as you like. If you wanted to, you could glaze completely over these to make these transitions really smooth, but I wanted to try and keep a little bit of texture on there as well. So parts of the leg, again, that's a perfect view to kind of see what parts are going to be able to be seen by the light of the hammer. So as you're looking down there, the back of the ankle probably wouldn't be caught. It would be cast a shadow from the cloak, and edges like this. So edges are going to be focusing the light a little bit more. So the surfaces will be fading away, but the edges will be a little bit brighter, so we can start building those edges up a little bit as we get further down. And you'll see as well that I've actually put a bit of scale colour black metal on all the metallic parts. So I have gone black metal and silver with the shoulders. You remember we were discussing that, and I was trying to decide which way to go with that on the previous video. But same with the cloak as well. We put that. It's actually a slight mix of Corvus black as well into the black metal, just to soften this. I think we talked about this in the Pariah video about softening and matting the gloss level down on the first layer of a metallic. And sketching these out, so this is going to be quite a good area of the model to sell this OSL, because there's so much texture in there with the recesses that are cut into it. So obviously some parts of it are going to be hit, and other parts are going to be kind of caught in shadow, and that's going to be really good to start selling the OSL on the back side of this model. So we're going to be catching all of these areas here. But as soon as that edge drops over into shadow, that's going to be a nice harsh edge, if you like, on that. So the second colour on the palette is Vallejo model colour yellow green, and we're just kind of sketching in some edge highlights now, and the hammer is going to have to be a little bit brighter. So the light source itself is always going to be brighter than the glow that is cast on the surface. The edges you can get away with playing them a little bit brighter as well, but the hammer is going to have to be the bright light source here, so that we can see where the light is actually coming from. If we painted all of this the same, if we painted the hammer and then the actual glow that's hitting these edges here the same, then it wouldn't kind of resonate quite properly, and the mind would realise that it was a trick and it wasn't really working. So the yellow green, again, it's a very translucent paint in itself anyway. Yellow paints tend to be very translucent, and it's watered down as well. It's probably 1 or 2 parts water to 1 part paint, and now you can see we're doing that scribble again with this yellow green paint. So the yellow green starts to pull this colour a little bit more towards the green yellow hue. This is the glow from this, and the glow that I'm using to make all these look a little bit eerie is actually inspired from the Alien poster. If you remember the original Alien poster from the late 70s, it was that glowing green egg in the middle of space with an eerie glow around it, and the egg itself was like a really pale greeny yellow, and then the glow around it was green, and that's what we're trying to portray a little bit here. We're going to start using a little bit of contrast paint as well for a colour glaze later in some of the videos, where we can pull this a little bit further over towards the green spectrum in some of the areas. Now here I've filled that gap in there with some Vallejo model putty, just so that that's a hole when we assembled it. If you remember, there's two parts of the hole, or 2 sides of the part, and then there's a hole that's running through the centre of it. So I've just filled that a little bit with some plastic putty, so that I can get a good light source in there. That's going to be almost a white light in the centre of that, so that's going to be the power source running through and coursing through the centre of this hammer. It still makes me laugh that this Necron is actually wielding a hammer. It looks so alien, having a Necron holding a weapon that's not a scythe or a staff of light. But as I said last time, the Necrons did have a relic called the Tremor Stave. So I will no doubt scribble some rules for this. But it's mostly just for fun, this conversion and this paint job. So making sure that all of these are going to be catching some light. So I'm going to make those all the kind of the power cores and things, they're going to be metallic, but I'm just kind of sketching on some highlights for them there, where they're going to be catching a bit of the light source. The ones underneath, where you see I'm just painting it there now actually, that part there, I'm going to try and use that as a bit of a light source as well. So we're going to have the top edge of that very bright, and then the cable underneath it as well, that's obviously going to be a power source, because that's powering the hammer, probably with the orb in the pommel. So yeah, there's all sorts of different things that you're trying to explain with this. So what's a light source, what's reflecting, the energy cores and things are the energy cores on the bottom of the hammer. I've wanted to try and keep those silver, and then just have a glow casting on them, just to have a bit of a light direction coming from the hammer as well, just to sell the glow a little bit more. Catching the edges again. So this is the yellow green still, We're just kind of casting and glazing between a little bit of yellow green and olive green, catching the knuckles and things. And this is a very thinned down paint anyway, and like I say, it's not very opaque, so you can get away with scribbling. That's a combination of scribbling and scrubbing. So you can get away with scribbling the paint on quite aggressively in some areas. This thigh is actually causing me a bit of a problem at the moment. It's I can't quite get the soft blend from the olive green down to that blue. Actually, I after this video, I glaze a little bit of the night blue across the whole thigh, just to soften that transition out a little bit. Now doing the legs and everything down there has all been done with the black metal and Corvus black mix. So we're just kind of highlighting and sketching. So we don't want the highlights on the legs down there to be metallic. They need to be kind of reflecting back on the glow, so we can because they're metallic as well, we can take those sharp highlights up quite high. Now this is one of the things that's quite important, that we are highlighting the correct side. So we're highlighting the underneath of the ribs there, so the hammer is below the ribs. So normally when you're highlighting, if I was highlighting that rib cage, as you saw in the last video when I was highlighting the blue, I was highlighting the lower ribs, the ribs that were facing upwards. So now I'm highlighting the upper ribs and the edges of the ribs which are facing downwards, because the hammer is lower, so it's going to be catching the bottom edge of those rib cages, or the rib cutouts, if you like, on the Necron. And that's just these little things are going to be selling where that light source is coming from and where it's emanating from. So I've probably got a little bit. You can see the yellow green is sorry, the olive green is probably pooling a little bit too much at the moment when I was doing that. So I probably had a little bit too much paint on the brush. I needed to wipe that off. So just when I was doing the arms. So again, we've got some metallics here. These are going to be reflecting and casting that bright light back. So this is a combination of yellow green and olive green, just to sell that glow back. The metallics are going to be taken up a little bit brighter as well. I do like the metallics on these models a little bit darker, which is where that Corvus black mix kind of comes in. And then also it gives you a range to highlight it up to things like Model Air Chrome, which is one of the final spot highlights that I tend to use on the metallics here. So this again, you're trying to decide whether this is a power source or whether it's just part of the hammer that's reflecting. I was making this one as a reflection, so these parts here are going to be nice sharp highlights that are reflecting back this colour. And now we've got this is the final colour here is ice yellow. Unfortunately, I go a little bit heavy just on that initial stroke. You'll see I've got a bit of a heavy mark on that in the first section there, and I do try to kind of mix a little bit of the olive green back into that to soften it down, because this needs to be where the texture starts coming through, so you can really start building up the texture of this one. So the yellow green also will start taking the contrast paint we're going to use in the next video is going to be contrast warp lightning. It's a nice green and it kind of pulls everything together a little bit and changes the hue. Contrast paints are great for glazing colours back into, or glazing colours over what we've been painting. So you can see this is a little bit of the olive green that I'm just trying to blend in to soften that bright spot that I made on the front of the hammer, and now it's looking a little bit better as well. You can get an idea of where the hammer is hottest, if you like, where the energy is coming from. So very small marks. The brush I'm using is not a new brush. It's a few months old. The tip isn't great, but because the tip isn't great, it allows you to do these kind of sketchy random marks. The human brain will always try to make a little bit of order out of random things, so when you are trying to paint random scribbles, they tend to look a little bit too uniform. So an old brush is actually quite good because the bristles don't stay exactly where you're placing them, so they'll splay out just a tiny bit when we're messing around with this. Okay, so we're going to carry on here. It was just a quick break to go and get some lunch. So exactly the same thing, we're going to come back in with this olive green and start sketching out some more of the highlight areas. So on the top of the staff, running all the way down here as well, and then also you can see the highlight line on the silver. That's going to be pretty much the same highlight line that we're going to catch on the casting the light from the hammer as well. So light sources like that are really useful if you can use your light source. So the lamp that you're using to paint with, just pay attention to where those, if you can get the model turned to reflect where the light source is that you're trying to paint, then it's very useful, and it's very helpful to see where you actually need to get those highlights placed down. So just building this one up. So because this orb is going to be A, very bright, and B, it's very close to the cloak, we can actually push these very bright. So when I was saying earlier that the light source needs to be brighter than whatever it's glowing onto, if it's that close, you can get away with being that top scale, if you like, on the cloak. We can get away with that one there that I'm just painted there. We can get away with that one being a lot brighter because it's so close. So we can, once we've taken the highlights of the orb up a little bit further, we can start bringing that tone and that color saturation and color brightness into that one there that I'm just painting there. We can bring it into that one, and a tiny little bit on the tip of the one below it. And then we can glaze and fade the brightness out. So just kind of sketching in the limits to where the light is going to be casting on these. Again, any kind of recesses, so that center recess is not going to be have any light cast into it. And this is where we're going to start. So as soon as we get this on, you'll see how much more it kind of sells the glow, because this orb has suddenly become brighter than where it's glowing onto. So that's now brighter than the glow on the cloak. And you'll see when it turns around, it sells the glow a lot more because it's a brighter colour straight away. There we go. So you can see you're getting an idea of where the light source is coming from now. Again, this is a very wet yellow green that was placed on there and then scribbled around, and then that's that very hot highlight that I was talking about, because it's very close to this orb. So that's going to be the if you imagine a light source and how like a spotlight. So the spotlight's going to be very hot at the centre, and then it's going to fade out a little bit. So there's not a lot of paint left on my brush now, so I'm just kind of fading that very harsh highlight that we put down first, and we're just kind of fading it out, and it's going to be a little bit less and less as it moves away from the light source. But you can see how that's kind of working already, in a sense of the light drop off. It's going to be quite interesting on these to see how much texture we can get into the metallic parts here as well. embossed on the underside. So same again, so this is going to be an interesting part to sell this this glow as well. So we're going to having a glow on the arms. We're going to have two glows on the arms, one from the underside from this orb, and then one on the top side from the hammer. So getting that transition, and the transition, because the arm is such a thin cylinder, we're going to have quite a sharp transition from the green back to the blue of the armour, and then back to the green on the other side where the hammer's glowing on it. But the intensity of those is going to be very, very different. So the underside of the arm here is quite close to the orb, and then the top side of the arm is quite a long way away from the hammer. So the intensity of those glows is going to be different. So the underside here will probably go up to like a yellow-green with a couple of spots of the ice yellow on there as well, whereas the top side will pretty much just be olive green. So here again you can see the intensity building a little bit on the underside of this arm. Again, this little scribbling motion to try and create some texture. Even though the arm is smooth, you're still going to get a little bit of texture from the lightning-esque orb. You can imagine that orb has got lightning kind of coursing through it. Imagine like a Tesla ball, one of those little Tesla balls, Tesla orbs that you put your hand on and you get the lightning striking out at your fingers. So imagine one of those, and imagine the reflection that's going to cast on a smooth surface. It's almost going to be a mirror-like reflection, so you'll be able to see all the little lightning strikes and all the texture in there. So that's why we're doing the scribble. And the underside again. So this is the underside edge of that. Is going to be caught by the glow all the way around, underside all of the shoulder pads, and then we can start highlighting the shoulder pads up on the top side to be actually metallic. So we'll do some like model air chrome and some brighter highlights on the top. I'm loving painting this. Like the more kind of small thin glazes that we're putting on this, the more it's coming together. The more excited I am to see this model finished. So I'll do, once I've got this part of the video done, I'm going to do the rest of the OSL on the model. So the lightning cords on the right hand side, and down onto the shield, and then we'll come back and we'll do some more finishing off on the hammer. So hopefully next time you see this in a video, the other side of the model will be up to this stage as well. It's not really going to be quite as strong a glow. Like the orb here is casting a light right across onto the other side of the cloak. The little lightning rods or the lightning wires on the left hand side of the model that you see there above the shield aren't going to be casting that much of a glow. Right, now up onto the spine, exactly the same. It's going to be catching on there as well. The spine is an interesting one because it's got quite a lot of texture on there, quite a lot of angles. So we won't be able to get a lot of graduation light fall off on there. It's more going to be picking out the edges of what the orb is actually hitting. So the shoulder pad there, the part of the shoulder pad that I'm painting there, that's a little bit more of what of where we can get a little bit more of a graduated fade. So I'm dragging the olive green down to the brightest point, and that's where we're going to get that graduated fade into that part of the armor. But like I was saying, the spine is going to be, because it's got so many little layers and small details, it's going to be a lot more specular highlights, if you like. So the edges are going to be highlighted on there. Underside of the arms again, we're just kind of building up that intensity on the underside of the arm. It can probably go a little bit further as well on that one. I need to get some yellow green in there. but you can see now, because that orb is a bit brighter, that was really looking like it was glowing, and that was where the light source is from. Alright, back onto some of the texture, and we're going to do I think we're going to do the head of the hammer here. Or are we glazing? Yeah, so we're glazing. So we're glazing all of this back to soften some of the texture, and also bring a bit more colour back into the hammer at the moment, just to see how this is looking. The hammer head as well down here. So we want the top of each of those surfaces to be a bit brighter. So we're glazing up to the top edge. Just to bring this, the olive green is almost like the colour of the light source, the inherent colour of it. So everything else that glows is a bit brighter, but we do need to keep that olive green colour in there. Scribble, scribble, scribble. There we go, keeping that texture on. I'm just doing the edges as well. The edges are always going to need to be a bit brighter. Just the light volumes that are going to be around the model, that are around the hammer. Same little scribble action on the top of this. It's an interesting idea trying to decide where the power source is coming from on this. And I wanted this originally. I wanted the hammer face to be the light source, so that head, the hammer head. And I was going to have the light source kind of cascading down from that hammer head, so almost like it's a big torch, and then the head of the hammer is the light source, kind of pointing forwards. But it's such a distance away from the model's feet that when we put the model on a base, like you can imagine the plinth that I'm actually holding it on, the model holder that I'm holding it on now. If you imagine that is the base, then the light source that would be coming from the hammerhead would just be missing the base, and there wouldn't be any glow. So I decided to make the whole hammer glow a little bit more. If you imagine, like Mjolnir was just a big glowing thunder hammer. That's the sort of direction I decided to go, and I just wanted this model to be really dark and eerie, and the glow being the prominent part of this. So as I'm adding those scribbles on there, you'll notice that it's getting a little bit more intense towards the top. So I've left the brush towards the top of those two panels on the side of the hammerhead. I've left the brush on the model for longer when I get towards the top panels. So I'm making more scribbles and more and kind of building up the paint intensity on the top side, and it's creating a little bit of a fade, a panel fade if you like. And then the same on here. So I'm leaving the brush a little bit longer on the edges, and I'm just kind of creating that shape, the light shape on that hammer edge. Hammer edge? Yes, hammer edge. Apologies for the sound, guys. The neighbours are clearly doing some work as well. Okay, so this is a little bit of a glaze coming in. Again, trying to soften the lightning and the brush strokes around. Just soften those down a little bit. And the model is it's going to be quite a bright model on this side. I think there's still some way to go on the brightness. Sketching in all this glow down here. That's about going to be the kind of the shade of the glow. That's going to be about the right intensity. You can see us just adding little edge highlights there on the bottom of the calf muscle, or the calf part of the leg, just to give a bit of edge and a bit of shape to the model as well. But this side, because that hammer is going to be so bright, I'm going to be working it up a lot further as well. Because that hammer is going to be so bright, it's going to be quite good fun to see when it comes together. The kind of the contrast between the bright green hammer and the blue on the opposite side. But trying to balance that is going to be quite important. So we might have to pull some glazing in left and right to either darken the green, or I think this part here that I'm putting on now, I think that's going to end up being a little bit too bright, a little bit too prominent. So that's easily glazed back though, because we can just use the night blue, which is the base color of the armor. I can only apologise for the hammering that's going on. I don't know what they're doing. So it's important when you're doing this as well, just to take your time. We are building this up in layers. It's even though it's easy to kind of glaze it back if we do make a mistake, we don't really want to. So edging some of the highlights in. So this is yellow green again, but edging some of these highlights in is going to be quite. You've got to be quite careful with it, because of all the kind of the fades and the glazing that we've been doing. It's quite difficult to match the colour if you do make a mistake. So just when you are doing these kind of like little edge highlights, just be careful that you haven't got too much paint on the brush, and you're not going to be blobbing paint onto the surface on the first time that brush makes contact. So keep it light. Keep wiping that brush off. And the underside, so this is the undersides again, and this is the yellow green, so we're going to get a little bit brighter. Just on those undersides. The undersides, because they're such a sharp edge, they're going to be catching a little bit more light, in exactly the same way as you would normally highlight at a top surface. So when we were highlighting those the other ribs on the opposite side. The casting a bright spot on the metallics is actually quite an interesting process to try and do, because you're trying to pull a little bit of the metallic through as well. So you've got to highlight the metallic up to where the glow hits, so you can kind of fade it down. And this is one of those occasions where I was talking about just being very, very careful about what you're highlighting. So you've got to catch all these edges. If I slipped on one of these, it would take a while to kind of glaze this back again. The edges all the way down here and everything. So this is purely going to be from the light source. Catching those edges, and this is a little bit of a funny one on that top of the hammer, because that's going to be caught and glowing from quite a few different sources. So we're going to have the actual hammer itself, and then the little cable that's powering it, and a little power source at the top as well. So quite a few little light sources that are going to be around the top of that hammer. So we could paint that pretty much all this olive green, and then start picking out some of the details a little bit more as we go. So again, trying to make those light volumes on this, so that you can see a little bit more of where the light is coming from. Just leaving the brush and moving the paint around on the areas where we want the paint to be a little bit brighter and to be a little bit more intense. Just doing more work with the brush in those areas. Slightly out of focus there, sorry about that, guys. And back in with the yellow green for the edges, and then just those little ticks, the ticks of catching a light source across here. So glazing this brush marks back again. That single hair is going to be annoying. And underneath that small edge there, underneath the thigh that I was just highlighting, that's the same principle as the underneath of the ribs. So as soon as you're catching the underneath of the ribs, it's going to be catching the underneath of that little thigh plate, the underneath, the underside edge of all the leg panels and everything like that. So it's just making sure that you are consistent on all of those, and there we go. That's all the glow all kind of sorted out. It's looking good. I'm pleased with it so far. The position is getting there. The thing that we're going to change and kind of tweak as we go along is the intensity. I think we're trying to add a little bit of intensity back in here again, but the intensity itself is we can build on that with some more of the yellow green and the ice yellow as we go further and further into this glow, into this OSL. The hammer, as I said, the hammer is going to get very, very bright indeed. So we're just going to glaze over and soften some of this back down again, ready for the next stage, which is going to be up to so we're going to be bringing that all the way up to like ice yellow and then ivory as well, before we glaze over everything with some contrast warp lighting. The contrast warp lighting just pulls everything back towards the green kind of hue, and keeps it that eerie green from the Alien poster, which so inspired this model. Well, not really the model, but so inspired the colour scheme. I wanted this kind of eerie green going around. There we go, just glazing and pulling it up and not going past that edge as well, so we can keep that edge nice and sharp. And we've just slowed it down here as well, so that you can have a look at the finished glow, because I put this mold down a little bit quickly at the end of the video. So there we go, guys. I hope you enjoyed that part 3, and I'm now going to go and carry on a little bit more, and I will see you again on the next video. Thank you very much, guys. Take care and stay safe.